One of the things that I've been thinking about in life is the expectations that are placed upon us. Because what I have this kind of assumption that I hold about Americans, that a lot of us don't really have a clear goal in our life. We don't have a clear kind of mission that's driving us. That most of us, maybe at some time you had one. Maybe at some time you were like, I have a goal. I'm going to become the president, CEO of this company. I'm going to work my way up to being a doctor or whatever. But at some point, maybe you've reached your goal and you didn't have another goal past that. Or maybe for you, just life has gotten busy and is starting to pile up on top of you. You see, my assumption is this, that most Americans are really either like kind of moving through life without any direction, or their direction is being created for them by the expectations that are placed upon them. Does that make sense to you? You are going from here into there, and you're taking the kids over here, and you got to drop them off over here, and oh man, I forgot, I got to get this ready, and oh, I said I would bring this meal to this person, and I forgot the thing at work, and it's at the desk, and I got to get it, I got to put the notes in, and your whole life is lived by navigating from expectation to expectation. I used to, when I was early on in doing pastoral ministry, I would seek out kind of quiet places to go study for sermons and get stuff ready. And so where I used to go was to the cemetery to study for sermons, because nobody talks much there. You know, they're all real quiet. I don't know what the deal is, but they're all... So I think that's funny. Come on, you guys. I would go and I would literally walk around the cemetery and I'd pray through my sermons and I'd go and write them down sometimes. And oftentimes, though, I just would spend time with God and I would walk around and I would look at people's headstones. And I would see their little epitaphs. Have you ever seen those? You maybe get the emails with the clever ones and stuff. I would read those and I wondered if the person lived their life for what would go on their headstone someday. Have you ever, like, I'm sure you've heard, I mean, this is like an old sermon illustration. I really did walk around cemeteries a lot. But, I mean, have you ever thought about that? Like, what is your headstone going to say someday? Is it going to talk about all the softball practices that you got your kids to? Is it going to talk about how much time you spent at work? Is it going to talk about how you neglected your family? Is it going to talk about the good? You know, I always, the ones who are like, put on there like, life is good, live it hard, or whatever, where it's like, you really didn't have anything to say about this person. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, what do you want to be said about you when you die? Because my guess is, and my assumption is, that as an American, you are probably living your life going from expectation to expectation and not having much direction in where you're going. And so you're constantly just fulfilling these expectations, but you're not really maybe getting anywhere. You're not moving forward. Maybe you even feel like that about your life. Like it just feel like we're stuck in a rut. Have you ever felt that way? I'm just stuck in a rut. This morning, I want us to start looking at something that I hope will help us get unstuck out of the rut. We're going to be looking in 2 Chronicles chapter 29, and I will tell you what, if I were you, I would just put a bookmark there in my Bible, because every single week for the next couple of months, we're going to be going to this chapter. We're going to be studying 2 Chronicles chapter 29. Now, if you are like me, I didn't grow up like memorizing the books of the Bible, so if you don't have them memorized, there's a table of contents in the front where you can look in your Bible and find that. That's okay. I know you're like, pastors should have that. I just don't. I'm sorry. I know Jesus. That makes more of a difference. So be sure, go ahead and look that up if you need to. Look in the front. Get to 2 Chronicles chapter 29. While you're getting there, I'm going to take a drink because I'm parched, and then I'm going to kind of give you some context of this chapter, all right? We are about to come into the life of a gentleman named Hezekiah. He is a king of what is known as the southern kingdom of Israel. Now, maybe you know a little bit about the history of Israel and the Jewish people. You're like, I didn't know it was a history class that we're setting. Yeah, that's what we're doing real quick. The nation of Israel is founded, right? Moses, do you remember Moses? He leads the people out. They go through the Red Sea. It's really cool. And then he comes out of that, and then there's a king named Saul who comes into play. And King Saul is the very first king of Israel. But King Saul is not a very good man, and he disobeys God. And God strips the kingdom from him and gives the kingdom to a man named David, right? Everybody with me so far? You've got this is the history that's going on. I want you to understand what's going on here. David has a son named Solomon. Solomon takes over the kingdom, and Solomon has a son whose name is Rehoboam. I'm not going to go through every single son, all right? But I want you to understand what happened. Rehoboam becomes king as a young man. And he goes to the wise men of his day, the elderly men, and he says, gentlemen, I'm going to take over this kingdom. I really want to get some things done. I'm thinking about like enforcing some new labor laws and some new taxes. And the wise men of the kingdom, they say to Rehoboam, listen, if you enslave the people, they will rebel against you. But if you serve the people, they will serve you for the rest of your life, and your kingdom will be this amazing kingdom. Rehoboam goes to his young buddies, right? That's what we all, if you have a teenager, you understand this, right? They take your wisdom, and then they go to their buddies, right? He goes to his buddies, and he's like, what do you guys think? And they're like, tell them that if they thought your dad was rough on them, that you're rough, that he's like a panty waist compared to you, basically is what they say. And you enslave those people, and you get what you can out of them. And so Rehoboam takes the advice of the young men, and he begins to enslave the people, and he begins to put more taxes on them. Everybody loves taxes, right? Everybody is with me on that? Yes? No. The people rebel. A military leader named Jeroboam raises up, and he takes tribes, literally entire tribes of Israel, thousands and thousands of people with him to the northern. They create a new kingdom called the Northern Kingdom. They actually, in Scripture, if you've ever read this, it's kind of weird. They're called Israel in the Scriptures, and Rehoboam's kingdom is called Judah. So if you ever read that, the king of Israel and the king of Judah, and it's kind of weird to you, that's what's going on, is in this time period, there are two kingdoms, the Northern and the Southern Kingdom. And we come into the middle of the reign of the kings of the Southern Kingdom in chapter 29 of 2 Chronicles, and we see Hezekiah the king coming into his position of authority. Now, over the next few months, we are going to look at Hezekiah's reign. We're going to look at the things that he did, because I believe that some of the things that Hezekiah did, that there's some principles that we can pull out and start applying into our own lives, and I'll just kind of tip my hat to what I'm hoping will happen out of this. You see, I don't have a lot of expectation for sermon series. I feel like God works in me, and then I preach these sermons, and I kind of on you guys, and you either take it and you wash it off, or you maybe incorporate it into your life and you live it out. And that's kind of, you never heard a sermon illustrated that way, have you? You're like, you gross, sick. But my hope and my prayer for this sermon is that it sticks. And not just this sermon, but this series. That I'm really going to tip my hat. My hope is that God will start something big in our church. That he is going to, and big doesn't happen from the stage. You know that, right? Big happens in your heart and in your life and in your mind. And my prayer has been lately that God will start. Have you ever heard of a revival? Like old Baptist churches have a revival, and you get the guy like out here dancing, and he's really hellfire, brimstone, and people are accepting Jesus. My prayer is for a renewal. That the people of God in this place would start to get so connected to him that it would just start to flow out of you. That there would be prayer groups that start to raise up out of this church. You know, I don't know that our church is really a praying church yet. If you don't know the story of Epic, we're only like 2 3/4 of a year old as a new church, and we're still kind of forming who we are and what this church is about. And I don't know that there are groups of people just gathering to pray in this church. Not because I forced it and I've created a prayer ministry, but because God is so moving in your midst that you're like, we just have to pray, we have to seek him, we need him. I don't know that there are people in here who are feeling led by God to start Bible studies at their place of work. I don't know that there are people in here that are feeling led by God to start taking unwed mothers who are young diapers and starting ministries that will take care of these children. I don't know if God is really moving us as a whole, as a church, where there is this renewal that is being born inside of us, where there is this burning in our bones for the word of God to come out of our mouths. I have a feeling that our church right now is a little bit more like going to the movies. And we enjoy the show, and we eat our popcorn, and we drink our pop, and we say hello to the person next to us, and we walk out, and we live our lives. I'm telling you, I didn't move from a church that I loved and that loved me and that we had this great ministry for a church that's just watching the movies. I moved I came following a call from God to see a movement of God and his people. And it starts with me, but it doesn't happen because of me. God has to be doing something incredible in my heart, but he also has to be doing something incredible in your heart. And my prayer is, I think there are some people in our congregation like that, but our congregation isn't like that. Do you get it? I am calling all of you out. Maybe you're already there and that God is already moving and you're using your business as a ministry and you're using your place of work as a ministry and you're using your friendships as a ministry and you view it all through that lens, but maybe not. And if not, let's see what God does over the next couple months. I'll tell you, I think this is an exciting time to be a part of Epic. It is either going to be an exciting time or a very telling time. And it is not up to me. It's up to you. I don't think it's a question of whether God wants to do it. I think it's a question of whether we are willing to let him do it. Does that make sense? And so this morning we go to 2 Chronicles 29. And this, as I get there, this is what 2 Chronicles 29 says. Starting in verse 1 and 2. We're just going to read the first two verses this week. Hezekiah was 25 years old when he became king. What were you guys doing when you were 25? Having kids maybe, like starting your first career, getting out of college. Some of you slow people, I'm just kidding. Maybe doctors. What age do doctors get out of college? Like, I don't know, 30s, 40s, something like that. I know I was buying a motorcycle, right? And I was riding it, and it was awesome. And Hezekiah is a king. This guy has responsibility on his shoulders. When there is a famine, who do they go to? They go to the king. When there's a war, whose job is it to figure out how to protect the boundaries? It's the king. Hezekiah is 25 years old, and he has the responsibility of a man who should be 50, right? Who should have lived some life and have a little bit of something underneath him to give him some weightiness in his life. Instead, you have a 25-year-old. You ever had a 25-year-old work for you? Right? You're like, whoo, yeah. You have to teach them, right? You kind of have to babysit them because their whole lives, they've had everything given to them. If they flunk a test, well, just retake it. It's okay. And 25, he's a king. He reigns in Jerusalem for 29 years. It was a long reign. His mother's name was Abijah, daughter of Zechariah. Listen to this. This is where we're going to hone in today. Verse 2, Hezekiah, did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father David had done. Hezekiah did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father David had done. Let me explain to you why this is such a big deal. You see, Israel, I told you that there were two kingdoms, and there was the northern kingdom, Israel, and there was the southern kingdom, Judah. What was happening was the people of God had started to take the things of God and push them off into corners. Does that make sense to you? They became, the temple literally starts to get strewn with just dust, and this is the place where you come to worship God, but instead it's got cobwebs in it, and people have ransacked it and taken out the gold out of it, and people have stopped coming to worship there, and instead the Israelites set up these high places. Maybe you've read about high places in the Bible, and the high places were places where the Israelites would go to sacrifice animals to sometimes Yahweh, God, and sometimes to other gods, because they were very syncretistic, which meant that they included worship of other gods in with their worship of the one true God. And they had left and lost a relationship with God who created them. The God, remember back to Moses, I started there. They had lost the relationship with God who said, "You are my people. Come, I will set you free. Walk with me." They left him. And so, when the chronicler tells us that Hezekiah did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father David had done, this is a big statement about the character of Hezekiah. This is actually, I think that this is kind of his epitaph, what would have been on his gravestone if he had one, because this is written telling us kind of the beginning. This is who he is, and then the rest of it you watch and you see it all unfold. And so I wanted to focus on this today, because my question to you guys, my question is really a simple one. What's going to be written on your headstone someday? Hezekiah's is this amazing statement about him doing what's right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father David had done. his father wasn't David, right? We already have kind of established that David was a king way before him, like a great-great-great-great-grandpa. There's a significance to them cutting out all of the fathers and all of the great-grandfathers and just saying he is David's son. There's a huge significance there. There's other person who this is said about. Jesus later on will be claimed that he is David's son. What they're doing when they claim that is that they are a person in the likeness of David. Do you know what was said about David? That he had a heart that was beating after God's heart. You see, what they're saying about Hezekiah is that his life was a life lived on loan for God. His life was a life lived on loan for God. You see, simple assumption, right? My assumption is, I started with this, that you and I are just living, going from expectation to expectation. Got to get work done, got to get food for the kids, got to get this done, got to get this done, got to get this done, got to get this done. And there's no direction in your life. What would it take for you to get some direction? What would it take for you to get out of the rut? What would it take for God to inspire you, for God to speak to you, and for you to listen to him? What would it take? You see, my hope is that someday I will have something written about me like that. That Kent gave it all for Jesus. He left it all on the floor. It was all on the field. There was nothing taken back to the bench with him. He left it all. What will it take for you? I want to tell you what I personally think. I think part of it is understanding your mission in this world. I've been praying to God a lot about that. If you don't have a mission, I would encourage you to start with our mission as a church, connecting people to God one person at a time. But God, that's kind of the general Christian mission. God may even give you a mission that's deeper than that. Let me tell you mine, and then I'll close this up. Short sermon because I'm leading worship and it kills me to do both. So you guys are so lucky. Let me close this up by telling you what I think God has spoken my mission to be. And then I want to encourage you guys to start taking the time during your week to pray and ask him to speak to you about what he's calling you to. What does he want the next 30, 40, 50 years of your life to be about? Every one of us is getting closer and closer to the point where those numbers get shorter and shorter and shorter. So why are we wasting it? Let me tell you. I felt very called to plant this church, and my wife felt the calling too, and we didn't have any kids yet. We have since, it's been 5 years? We've since had 3 and are getting ready to have our 4th, which somebody asked me recently, how many did you guys want to have? And I was like, 3. And so, that's a lot of kids in a little short time period. So we don't have any kids, so needless to say, we could sleep, right? I mean, if you have kids, you're like, yeah, you don't sleep for the next 18 years. I mean, I'm in bed and I'm sleeping, and I've been praying. This is before we moved here, and I've been praying to God about what it is that he's calling us to. I didn't feel like it was just planting a church. You guys know the vision of Epic is for us to plant more churches where churches are needed, and I mean, that's a big vision, but this is my own personal, not what Epic Church's mission is or vision or whatever. This is just what I felt like God showed me that night. And please trust me, if you're new here, I'm not like this crazy mystic guy. Just occasionally I feel like God has really spoken into my life in this way. I went to sleep that night. It was a normal night. I don't remember anything about it. But I do remember the next morning when I woke up. I had this intense dream. You see, I do dream occasionally, like most of you, but my dreams are all crazy. Like they have Daffy Duck in them. And you know what I mean? It's like they're meaningless, just weird dreams. But this dream was very intense and very, I still remember it because it was so vivid to this day. I was walking into this large room. It was a very nondescript room, and there were all these people in bank lines. Do you know what I mean? Those lines that have the things that you pull out, and they're all waiting in line, and they're like, next, and there are hundreds and hundreds of them, and they're just like, next, and they're all taking their step, and they're turning, and you've been there, right? Miserable place to be. And I, with all the passion that I could muster, ran up and started destroying the bank lines. Because you see, all of these people were waiting in line to see God. And I knew that you don't have to wait in line. And I ran up and I'm ripping down these bank lines. And I'm like, you don't have to wait to see him. You don't have to stand in line. You can just go up and see him. He's waiting for you. He's longing for you. And I'm ripping them apart. And I woke up and I was like, that is it. That's what my call is in life. That's what I do when I preach up here, is to try to say to you, you don't have to wait in line any longer. He is ready for you to come up and engage with him. That's where it comes from in me. That is what I'm most passionate about, is to rip down the lines. Have you been far from him? You don't have to wait. Jesus has made a way for you. Have you been stuck in this religiosity where you have to perform all these rules and rituals? You don't have to wait. Jesus has made a way for you that you can get connected to him. And I am so passionate about it. When I feel like I'm in a rut and I've lost my way, I go back to Jesus and I say, what have you called me to? And he says, I've called you to rip down the lines. Get out there and get some people connected to me. You hear that I'm passionate about this? What is it that he is calling you to? I pray. I am praying that you will start to listen to his voice, that you will ask him, and that you will slow down your life enough that you will say no to other stuff enough that you can hear his voice, and whether it's through a dream or just something he speaks into you or something that somebody else says to you or something you read in the scriptures and it pops out. If you are not in the scriptures, you are sorely missing a relationship with God and a way for him to interact with you, because his Spirit uses the scriptures in your life to test you and to complete you and to move you. Man, what is it that God's calling you to? Would you take the challenge for just these next couple months to stop doing all the stuff, stop letting that drive you, and to start letting God drive you? I wonder what would happen in this church. I wonder what would happen in this city. You do know God changed the world through 11 people. We are not a large group. I know that. I don't have any pretension, whatever the word is, of pretense of us being this huge church. I don't think we need to be. I think we need to be a faithful church that has our heart so close to the chest of our God that when he speaks, we do it. You see, my hope is that someday there will be an epitaph on my grave that says, that boy, he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord. His heart was like the heart of God's.